Okay. I call the January 27, 2023 meeting of the Southern Personnel Board to order at 9:06. We'll call it. First order of business is approval of the minutes, which were circulated in advance of the meeting. Any questions, corrections, changes to the minutes?
I have one comment, page 2 under business administrator 2-fire. We consistently refer to business administrator 2 throughout that discussion, but we actually voted it as a business administrator 1 position. And it has the right classification, the A4. My only question is, if the minutes reflect how we actually motioned it, then I don't think the minutes should be changed, but obviously that wasn't the intent of what we were trying, right? So I don't know if we want to adjust the minutes or go back and listen to the tape and then potentially just add it to the next agenda to clarify the motion. I think you see what I'm saying.
Yeah. Excuse me, and my recollection certainly is that we voted it as a 1, not a 2. So I'm comfortable if we amend. Well, is there any further discussion? I mean, I'd be comfortable with amending the minutes to change it from business administrator 2 to business administrator 1. Anyone have concerns, issues with that? Because that's clearly what we voted. So I will move to amend the minutes, page 2, under business administrator 2 fire in the reclassification section, to say in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th line, Mr. Malinowski made a motion to reclassify the fire business administrator 1 position, which is currently, hold on a second. So right now it's where?
Admin assistant.
Admin
A3.
Okay, so right now it's an A3.
So the motion was to move it to an A4 business.
Right.
admin.
Okay, so let's change it. So I move that sentence in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th line, say Mr. Malinowski made a motion to reclassify the administrative assistant position in the fire department to business administrator 1 at a job grade 4. And leave open the possibility to reclassify this position to an A5 after hearing from Ms. Flanders-Accardi, understanding this may not occur in this fiscal year.
I'll second that, and potentially add a friendly addition to that, is also just strike the reference to business administrator 2 in its entirety under approval of job description, because we approved the job description as written. And then we classified. I just don't think we should reference business administrator 2 under job description. I would just want to add that on to your motion if you're willing to do that.
Yeah, I'm fine whether we do it that way or as a separate motion, but that's fine. Is there a second?
I'll second that. If you made the motion, if you're willing to take my, I'll second it.
Okay. We have a motion. All in favor? Roll call vote. Ms. Jasinski?
Aye.
Ms. Jones-Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. Thorburn? Aye. Mr. Malinowski?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. That is approved. Thank you. With that, I will move to approve the minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Ms. Jasinski?
Aye.
Ms. Jones-Johnson?
Sorry, aye.
Mr. Thorburn? Mr. Malinowski?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Minutes are approved. Thank you. Moving on to Chair's report very briefly. I just wanted to let the board know that the handbook had not sort of just fallen by the wayside, that we made a decision based on everything else we have been doing for the past 3 months, that we were not, it was not reasonable to think we were going to get this done in time to make the necessary changes for the warrant for this town meeting. So we have deferred working on that with a caveat that we have had multiple conversations with council. Council is supposed to be in the process of revising draft that we have provided them. But I anticipate once we get through what we need to get done for town meeting, we'll then return our focus to moving forward with that. So I just wanted to let the board know that that was ongoing. All right, moving into old business. Sarah, would you like to join us? Let me make, before we focus on the specific job descriptions, let me make a couple of comments about job descriptions in general. I think it's fair to say that our job descriptions are a mess, and they have been a mess for certainly as long as I've been on the board, and I'm sure long before that. We have, I don't know how many different formats for them. They contain different pieces of information. And I think, and I know several of you on the board have pointed this out. It's not hard to notice once you start actually looking at them. What I propose to do as a goal for the board in 2023 is to get all job descriptions on the same format. And I think the way we need to do that is A, to choose a format, and then B, to notify all departments that all job descriptions have to be on that format, have to be approved by maybe by the end of 2023. And keeping in mind that we already have to approve a lot of changes that were made in the salary review process. So I think we can use that as a vehicle, because obviously some people are not going to be happy that they may have just had a job description approved and now they have to have a different one, but I don't think we can avoid that. So anyway, I throw that out before we sort of approve some more that are not in a standard format, that I think we need to go back and rationalize how this is being done.
As long as we have it on a future agenda and have a process that we're gonna dedicate to it, I get it.
Okay. Okay. And just one other issue. We had hoped, I had hoped to be able to grade these positions that we're considering today at this meeting. We are having some, I'll say, hiccups with our consultant on how we go about doing that. But my firm expectation is we will be able to grade them and be able to put them in the SAP by our next meeting. So with that, I will turn it over. Sarah, if you'd like to offer comments about what you're proposing.
Sure. Well, so what you have in front of you is a job description for an ARPA funded position. The town set aside funds for a part-time clinician to work within our department for a 2-year period. I had looked at some comparables from other communities, either positions that were also funded by ARPA or positions that already existed, to draft the job description, as well as come up with a rate that was competitive, and that's the result of what you have in front of you.
Okay. Questions? Not seeing any. And as I understand it, not that it really matters for our purposes, but so this is ARPA funding, so it ends as of the end of 2024.
That's what I just learned yesterday.
And there was some discussion about, well, since this is ARPA funded, should we even put it in the SAP? But I think it's a town employee. I think the position should be there. If it turns out that for whatever reason, the position goes away, we can always remove it in the future, but I'd rather have it in than not.
I think just unfortunately, based on the current climate, whether it's ARPA or some other grant funding, I think it's important to just always have this available. And obviously, if they seek to make this a part-time position someday, they can go to the appointing authorities too. But I think it's important to have it in. My question really, not necessarily related to job description, but based on what you just said, right? Sarah has until the end of 24 to use whatever she was allocated from ARPA. But you have to wait until July 1st. Now, to use this, like, do we as a personnel board have a mechanism to allow them to start now? With the understanding this is coming, because I know we had this sort of discussion with I believe it was IT previously, because I would be willing to go a step further, and maybe you'd say it's not specific to how you worded the agenda today, Barry, but something to consider is, I don't know that this is something that needs to wait if we have a mechanism in place to help move it along, with the understanding that it's going to go to town meeting floor in March.
Typically, it would, positions are not in place until July 1st because we're waiting for funding through the operational budget. I don't know that there's any reason we can't start this in advance of July 1st, but I would just want to verify that with town council.
Well, the question I would have is, yes, it's approved for ARPA funding, but is the funding sufficient to cover, say, if they started working tomorrow instead of July 1?
Yeah, it's sort of outlined to be a 2-year period from whenever the starting point is, and it would just end when funding ran out.
I think we do have the authority to do it. I'm trying to find it in the SAP. I know there's a provision that allows us to essentially hire someone subject to subsequent town meeting.
I don't want to derail, but I guess when we're going to classify this next meeting, so I would
Right.
ask that if we find that provision, and we feel like Labor Council has weighed in, that we can apply it, that we include in our motion next time, the ability for Sarah to start and give her parameters. It has to be after town meeting, or it can be before town meeting based on a personnel board vote, or it has to wait till July 1st. Hopefully that's not the answer, but
Yeah,
just that we try to frame that up and get this moving. for her.
yeah, that's fair. Obviously, since we can't classify it today, it doesn't really matter until we have the information to do that. So, okay, I will make a motion then to approve the job description for youth and family services clinician. Is there a second? Any further discussion? Seeing none? Roll call vote, Ms. Jazinski,
Aye.
Ms. Jones Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Thorburn, Mr. Jazinski, Mr. Malinowski, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
It's a new board
Aye,
member.
yeah.
He's walking the
Sorry to
dog.
both of you.
Can't help
I
it.
apologize to both of you.
It's a ski, you know?
Yeah, Mr. is walking the puppy.
The chair votes aye. It's approved.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we move on to the community development coordinator position. There is a memo in your packets starting at page 9 from Mr. Belniak. This is a position, as most of you know, has been gone through a process at the select board. The job description has been approved by the select board, although I think there is an outstanding question about funding for the position, but we will know that by our next meeting when we have to classify.
Mr. Laurel Anderson is now here.
Oh,
The chair.
great. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. Rob Anderson, I'm the chair of the Economic Development Committee. Here to answer any questions, if any do come up, and kind of what our thoughts were behind the position, why we think it might be valuable to the town. I'm just here to be able to assist if there are any questions that pop up. So thank you for allowing me the opportunity.
Well, thank you for being here. Are there questions from the board? John?
I did have a question. Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. All right, John, then Michelle. Okay, all right, Michelle. Go ahead, Michelle.
Good morning, Mr. Anderson. Thank you for being here. My only question as I review the description is related to what is there a change in expectations as it relates to grants, the number of grants or the volume of grant money that would be coming in to support this additional FT of this role?
Well, there's always the hope for more. I think from the Economic Development Committee's perspective, when we were having Marika go out and search for grants, there was the expectation that those would be economic development led, things that had to do with infrastructure, business recruitment, business retention. And one of the things that we discovered while she was out there looking is that there are a variety of grants out there that extend beyond simply economic development. However, the EDC tends to view economic development holistically, and anything that improves the quality of life for residents makes it easier to attract businesses, to keep the talent living here in town. So things like culvert replacements, taking care of invasive species in our wetlands, trails, those are things that improve the quality of life for all residents. And with a full-time position with some dedication to economic development and some dedicated to identification, grant writing, and the project management, the town could actually find some great return on investment. So your question was, would we expect to see more? The expectation would be yes. And those grants would extend beyond just those that would be termed economic development in nature.
Thank you.
John?
I just, I don't support this position at all. Listening, it sounds like this position would write grants for all departments.
Yes. I will let you know that last night I had the opportunity to talk with the Conservation Commission. I think that there are grants that were identified that could potentially be tied to the municipal vulnerability preparedness that the town just went through, where the conservation agent might like some assistance. I think, as I said, and has been identified by members of the select board, that there are grants out there, and that having a Swiss Army knife type of position to go after those could be very useful, not only to the Economic Development Committee, but also to other boards and commissions. So to answer your question, yes, this would be one that would be a position that could help and assist a variety of departments and boards for the town.
I guess then my position would be, I would rather see some consideration to making this a grant writer position for the town rather than putting it under the Economic Development Commission. I just don't go along with this whole EGC business at all.
Well, it's the one thing I would say is that the position itself would report directly to the town manager. And as part of the discussion that we had, that's why the title change was to Community Development Director, so that it was kind of more encompassing of those things that would be beneficial to the community. Although there would be an economic development focus, the EDC has had a part-time position in the past. And in order to be kind of cognizant of budgets and everyone else, the idea of splitting the position into different tasks, all serving at the you know, having the town manager help guide in addition to feedback from the EDC would be beneficial to the town and a pretty good return on investment.
Yeah. Further questions?
Barry, I have one. Rob, thank you for coming today. So am I to believe that with this position, any committee or board that wants to pursue a grant has to go through the EDC to be able to do that?
No. And that's kind of one of the things where a little bit of flexibility and strategy can go. I would view that this position is one that can help where needed. Oftentimes, there are committees such as the Trails Committee that has identified grants in the past and have applied, and forcing them to go through another step of talking with this position might be a little bit untenable or something that they don't want to do. However, if there's a grant that they identify and there's not the bandwidth for them, this would be a resource that would be available to say, hey, listen, here's a grant, we need some help, can you assist? And I think that ability to be flexible and knowledgeable, and quite frankly, there are tons of grants out there. I know the ones that are focused on economic development, so I can direct someone in that direction. If they're out there looking and they stumble across something that could be useful to another board that they might not be aware of, that's an add-on benefit. So I would say that, and I'm not going to speak for the town manager or the town manager's office, but I would say forcing other boards and committees to check with this person to go after a grant is not a thing that the EDC would want to see.
Okay, so if you have the EDC is pursuing their own grants and your grant writer is working on grants, but another board or committee like Trails does come in, they need the grant, some help. But if you're tied up with doing it for EDC, I don't see a conflict arising here. I'm gonna have to agree with John on this. If we're looking to have somebody who's going to specifically work on grants, I mean, I don't even know how much time with this job description is actually dedicated to working on grants versus just working on stuff for EDC. But you're going to have, I just see there's just too many. I see EDC getting into too many different boards and committees, and there's too many lines being crossed with making this an overall person under the purview of the EDC. I believe if we're going to go in that direction, we should have a town grant writer and do it that way. I don't believe that this position should be under the direction of the EDC. That's just the way I'm reading this, Rob, and I may be misreading it. But I don't understand why we would have a grant writer for the town for all boards and committees under the direction of the EDC. The EDC is actually a committee. And so you're asking for a full-time position for this committee where the rest of us can't even get note takers. So I'm just trying to understand to be able to support this, but I think it's too cumbersome and there's no direction as to how much time is specifically for grants. And if we all want grants, every board and committee wants grants, your person can't do anything for EDC. So you understand that. So I don't know. I'm not really, this is not really sitting well with me. So that's just my.
No, well, and I will say that, you know, when you think about time allocation, and we're obviously from the EDC's perspective cognizant of the town's budget as well. I would say that if the personnel board thought that a grant writer for the town was worthwhile and a full-time grant writer was worthwhile, fabulous, that's wonderful. And I would fully support a full-time grant writer and a full-time economic development coordinator as well. I could very easily get behind that because economic development is so important to making sure that we keep the residential tax rate low. I think what we were trying to do in crafting this position to fulfill all of those things that were beneficial to the town, return on investment on grants, business recruitment, and business retention. And so although there is probably going to be some wiggle room at the beginning, from the EDC's perspective, we understand that whatever we are able to accomplish and bring to the town through grants, through businesses, is going to improve the quality of life for the people here. And so if it's 30 hours for grants, 10 hours for EDC, as long as things improve the town, I think the EDC would be happy. I think that the benefit of having that full-time position, working at town hall 5 days a week with the town manager there to assist and help guide. The EDC does not want to have this person always at our beck and call. That's not my goal as the chair. I don't think it's the goal of any member of our committees. So what we want to do is be able to capitalize on the grants that are out there, and as well as attract some businesses. So that's kind of the goal. I just want to make sure that people understand that the job description that we wrote, ran past the select board, was for a job that could provide the best value to the town.
Okay, thank you, Rob.
So let me just state my view on what we do, and recognizing that reasonable people can have very different views. But my view is that if the appointing authority supports a position and the appointing authority can get approval for funding that position from town meeting, that our job is simply to look at the job description and make sure that the job description comports with whatever standards we have for a job description. That I don't see our job as saying, yes, I think the town should have this position, or no, it shouldn't have this position. Ultimately, that's a call for a town meeting to make. But again, that's just my view. I understand others may feel differently. So from that perspective, I would support this because select board has approved it, and I don't have a problem with the job description.
So a few comments, but because our town administrator has been referenced at least 5 or 6 times during this discussion, I'd like to hear from him as the ultimate manager of this position if it moves forward. If he thinks this is the right way to, assuming the objectives of the position are all valid, which I haven't heard anyone say that we don't want grants, we don't want EDC, maybe a little bit over, but is this the approach that you're supporting behind and feel like you're in a managerial position to support it? Because I think that falls squarely, while I agree with 90% of what Barry said in terms of personnel board's role. Like, if the manager doesn't agree with it, then the job description. So I just like to hear where you're at, not to put you on the spot, but just any thoughts you have before I have some comments.
Sure. Just to be clear, town administrator hasn't been mentioned once this morning, but I do appreciate the elevation of the title.
I wasn't gonna go there, but
So, no, more people do, but you know. So look, the select board agreed to bring this forward. There's been a lot of conversation, I think, over the past several years about a grant writer and about trying to get somebody who can be focused on these things, you know, on the town's behalf. And there were conversations at the board level as to whether we need more EDC than just the part-time position, and whether or not the increasing this position to a full-time position and adding in the grant component was the right path forward. The board ultimately decided that they were satisfied with the job description. So I think that from a managerial point of view, it's going to be similar to what was done in the select board office with the treasurer's office, and having a shared position doing similar but different things, and trying to figure out how to make that work. And I appreciate Rob's comment on that balance. You know, some weeks it's going to be this, some weeks it's going to be this. You know, I appreciate Mr. Jasinski's comments about, you know, well, you know, is it gonna focus more on EDC things, and are EDC things gonna take priority over something else in that? It's gonna have to be the right person to be able to make the position like this work. And I assume that if we do move forward with this, it's not gonna be easy. It's not gonna be clear right out of the gate. It's something we're gonna have to try to figure out, and it could morph into something else down the road. But this would be the first step in the direction that the board has set forth.
Mark, when the board discussed this at their meeting, what was the vote on support for this job description? Was this a unanimous, they all agree, or was this I didn't see the meeting, so I wasn't.
It says
It was 3-1-1.
3-1 absent.
Yes,
Memo.
yes.
But they have it in the,
It was either 3-2
in the
or it
packet.
was 3-1 because you only had 4 members there that evening.
Okay.
yeah, it was 3 yes, 1 no, 1 absent member.
Thank you.
So I guess to finish, I think you're off the hot seat for now. I have thought about this, I've read it. Full disclosure, I've also been approached as chair of capital to weigh in on this. Capital will have a separate meeting, and I'm going to keep those comments aside. When I put my personnel board hat on, I had asked Vanessa to provide me a copy of all existing job descriptions that went to the Collins Center. And my concern with this job description as in front of us, if I buy into Barry's argument, is there is severe duplication between this role and roles we already have in the town. And potentially, and I think we've acknowledged at the beginning of the meeting before Sarah went, some of those job descriptions clearly are outdated. There are clearly roles in some of these people's job descriptions. I do not intend to name any of the titles right now that they're not doing. Rightfully so, because they've been reallocated to the flexibility terms that Mark mentioned. I just don't see the combination of these roles because I think it's duplicative of what's already in people's job descriptions. So either we're overcompensating people to do something that they're not doing, or we need to revise those job descriptions as well. Now, I realize there will be some collaboration along the way between a department head that has expertise in the area and someone that maybe has a little bit of a knack for grant writing. I also think it's going to be challenging to find someone to fit both of these roles at the same time, and would argue I fully support Mr. Anderson and the EDC in terms of they do need to get some additional help from business reach out, but I think going the full-time route here is not the way. I think the avenue is working with Mr. Purple, much like every other department has done in the recent years, to reshuffle roles, use everyone's talents in the right way, adjust the job descriptions as needed. And also, my concern on grants is I view that more as a consultant, not as an employee. And the reason I think it's a consultant is you never know what grants are coming. There's some predictable ones that come every year, and there are some that they come out of nowhere, right? And I want to have the ability as a town to be able to deal with what I'll call like a surge of grants coming out all at once around a certain initiative. And if you have someone for a certain number of hours a week, and let's just say they're supposed to be doing the grants, then guess what? EDC is going to fall by the wayside, and they're not going to be fully focused on their responsibilities. So I cannot support it as currently written. I think all the initiatives in here are incredibly valid, but I think our role as personnel board is to also connect the dots. And I think there's way too much overlap with what people are already supposed to be doing. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Go ahead, John.
Can I have the fire chief, if you come up here for a minute? This is here.
Yeah,
So happens when you show up.
I know, that's awesome. Thank you.
Good morning, chief.
Good morning.
Question. If this was a general grant writer. When you're looking at grants, would you want someone to apply for it and administer that's really oriented to the fire service versus someone that's just applies for grants, period.
We're fortunate that within the department, we have experience, writing our emergency management and fire related grants. So we have experience doing them. And again, my position, whether the town, I think the town could benefit from a grant writer, because there's a lot of money out there that would be available to people at time to just do that. But for the fire department, I think that currently we would use a grant writer from the town in a limited capacity and really seek out things that might be related to our department that benefits the larger town departments in town. But our assistance fire grant, our Department of Fire Services grants, our emergency management grants, our emergency management performance grants, we already write those and we have a template to do those, so they go pretty easy. So for us, we might use this position in a limited capacity.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other comments? Yeah, I mean, I just reiterate what I said. I take your point, Jason, but the fact that there may be other job descriptions where some of these responsibilities also appeared doesn't tell me that we shouldn't approve this job description where the town, at least to the select board, has said, okay, we want to go in this direction. We can certainly, and we will be going forward, be looking at all the job descriptions, and to the extent we need to move duties around or take duties away from certain positions, we can do that. But just in terms of the job description, reading the job description, again, as I said before, and the way I perceive what this board's role is, I don't have a problem with it. So, but any other comments? Rob, did you-
No, I always appreciate a spirited debate, and I think hopefully hopefully the personnel board understands what some of the goals of the EDC was, which was to one, again, have some EDC coverage for some of the initiatives that we have, but also provide further value to the town. So that's I think what our goal was with the job description, and trying to make sure that we did things that were in the best interest of everyone. So that's it. Thank you.
Dorian, did you want to say something?
No, I'm good. I think I've said enough.
Barry, before we take a motion, I just want to strongly encourage Rob, regardless of where this goes here, select board, advisory, town meeting, I would strongly encourage you to partner with the town administrator right now. Like, I know you've had this role unfilled for a long time, right, since Marika left. Try to see if there are talents already within our town organization that can help you. You're not gonna get all your initiatives started, right? But if there are certain initiatives that an employee that we currently have under contract or on the SAP can help you with, I'd strongly encourage you to do that. We have some very talented individuals, and I'd encourage you to do that now. Don't wait for July 1. Don't wait for the position to be filled in any way, shape, or form. And if you do fill your at least part-time position, I'd strongly encourage you to still do that.
Thank you.
Okay, well, then I think we need to vote on this. I'll make a motion to approve the job description for the position of Community Development Coordinator. Is there a second?
Second,
Okay, roll call vote, Mr. Jasinski,
no,
Ms. Jones Johnson,
I am not sure. Sorry. I'm gonna have, I need more information, so I guess I will have to vote no at this time.
okay. Well, we can, since we're not able to grade this position at this meeting anyway, we can defer it to our next meeting. But it probably would be helpful to Rob to know specifically what more information we'd like to see. And,
I'm hap-
I don't mean to put you on the spot, we can get it
That's
to
okay.
him later, but, so-
I can tell you, I'm very used to seeing hybrid roles where there are functions that are sort of more closely aligned that sort of, what I was hoping to see as I read through it was more distinction around the amount of time that would be a lot allocated to, you know, the development, economic development work versus the grant administration work. Just to make sure that if the need for a full versus a part-time versus full role is based on this value add around the administration, I would have expected to see a more robust description of that work. And that would then carry through to the type of individual we would be looking for as I looked at the requirements and qualifications. My other concern is that how then do we scale this, right? So if we get way more grants, as some of my committee members have talked about, if there are way more grants than we anticipate because we have now this person that's going to go out and find them, how are we prepared to scale and really grow this to us in a space where we really can demonstrate this return on this additional investment for the town? So for me, I just needed a lot more definition about the distinction between the roles, and then really sort of understanding the type of individual that we would be looking for to fill such a role that is a blended role for the town. That would be very
Okay,
helpful.
okay.
okay, so we'll put this back on the agenda for the February 10th, I think,
Yes.
meeting.
So do you want to withdraw your motion?
Yeah, I'm gonna withdraw that. So just for planning purposes, Rob, if you can plan on being with us on February 10th, you or Alan, I suppose, one of you, so we can continue the conversation.
Yep. Will it be held at the same time?
I think so. Yes,
Okay,
yes. Okay,
okay. Yeah, Alan or I, we'll try to be there, work permitting. And so what, I think we will try to do is, focus on, the kind of two things that I took away. And Michelle, thank you for that. Time allocation, ED versus grant writing, and, a fuller description of those separate roles and how they can get that return on investment to the town. I don't think we will have the opportunity to look through every job description and identify where there might be that overlap with the other committees. I do think that sometimes trying to do I think in a municipal environment, sometimes there's that natural overlap that happens regardless of job description. And what we'll try to do is make sure that whatever we have written up fits what's best for the community. But we'll work on getting that stuff done.
But I think we also should be clear, just in respect to Mr. Anderson and Mr. Belknap's time. If what Michelle is asking for is not going to change Dorian's vote, or wherever John was going to end up, wherever I was going to end up, it seems like you're going more on the favor. I just don't want to waste his time if we're still going to end up where that was just trending. So I just want to be respectful.
Well, I think everyone should chime in if I was asked to chime in on what I was looking for, if there are other
Yeah.
comments around that. And if at the end of the day, I agree, I don't want to waste Mr. Anderson's time as well. So,
well, I mean, I suppose if people are saying they're locked in and other information that Rob could provide could not possibly change their minds, then so be it.
I'm
So-
open-minded, more information is better for me.
So
My problem is the time that there's no explanation of how much time is being spent on grants and how much at EDC. And I really have a very
And-
difficult time trying to understand that on this.
And Rob, obviously, you're probably gonna have more insight after you go through budgetary meetings tomorrow, right? Because there's a component there that we're not touching, but I would strongly encourage you to collaborate with Mr. Purple and just see if any of these tasks really could be reallocated, which may then change how you approach this position in what you're trying to accomplish. Which then may lead to a better job description and obviously the support of the personnel board.
Yep, no, definitely. Okay,
All right, so at this point, I will withdraw my motion. And thank you for your time, Rob. We appreciate it. And we likely will be seeing you again.
okay, wonderful. Thank
Wait,
you.
one more question, John.
I don't approve of your withdrawing your vote. I would like Mr. Anderson to know all the other two members where we stand on the approval.
Well, I can withdraw. It's my motion. I don't need approval to withdraw it.
Then would it be appropriate for me to make a motion to get votes from the remaining two that haven't voted yet?
Well, I think we have one member, and based on this, at least two members saying they don't have the information that they feel comfortable voting. You can make whatever motion you want to make, but I think I'm trying to be fair here, and I understand if we voted now, this would be voted down. I think that's pretty clear, but I don't understand if people are asking for more information that might inform their vote, why we would say we're going to vote it down now and we don't want to hear any more information. And we don't want to give those people an opportunity to maybe change their mind.
Right now, as far as we sit right here now, we have one member of this board that wants more information. And
And another member who said it would be open to more information.
I don't need any more information. No,
Okay, that's fine. But I don't want to say to you, if you want to make a motion, make a motion. But I'm just saying,
I think, John, I think it's very clear where we'd end on a vote today. And clearly, Mr. Anderson needs support of the personnel board for this to advance, regardless of budgetary discussions, right? So that it doesn't in SAP. So I think we move on from this discussion. I think it's very clear that we have a 1-4 vote today, unless someone disagrees with that.
Well,
and
I don't, Michelle hasn't indicated, so I don't want to, I don't.
or
think
not enough information.
Yeah, we,
Not enough.
if we
today.
voted now,
I-
we'd lose. I don't.
Yeah.
I
don't
want to
think
make
there's
sure
any
I heard the comment, please. I just want to make sure I heard the comment accurately about, is it that, can you just repeat the last comment that was made, please?
Me, Michelle?
No,
Or John or Barry?
John, about the additional information. I thought I thought he said that we don't need more information, or I didn't hear him clearly.
Oh, you're saying, John, you're saying what John
Yes.
said.
Yes,
Sorry.
please, thank you.
I think John simply said he didn't need
Oh,
more
he did,
information.
okay. All right,
So
I'm not,
my suggestion is just to move on, to put this on the agenda, assuming things move along, and then we'll have a formal vote on it, assuming funding appears for the position at the next meeting. That's okay.
Wonderful.
All right,
Thank
thank you.
thank you.
Thanks, Rob.
All right, moving right along to the next position, and let me just go through this quickly. So, as you know, the town clerk had requested that we create, or not create a position, instead of having the assistant town clerk and an administrative assistant as we currently have, he wanted to have a deputy town clerk and an assistant town clerk. We did approve the deputy town clerk position. The Collins Center had a problem with calling the, what's currently the administrative assistant position, an assistant town clerk, because it is an administrative assistant position. And the only distinction is that the ability to administer oaths was being added. I subsequently had conversations with Mr. Hagerty to see if we could find a way to resolve this. And further conversations with the Collins Center. It was my suggestion that maybe a way to bridge this would be to call it administrative assistant / assistant town clerk. And I so communicated that to Mr. Hagerty about 10 days ago. I did not hear from him. The next I heard was, or saw, was the email that he sent, I guess, 2 days ago to all of you, which you've all seen. So there's no debate about the classification of this job. Jim does not argue that it should be anything more than a 3, nor does he argue that the only change is the adding of the ability to swear people in. And I've done some rough calculations. So I think he said in his email there were 250 volunteers, something like that. Now, obviously, they don't all get sworn in every year. I mean, I'm on 2 committees. I think I've been sworn in twice. But even taking the 250 and just recalling my own swearing in, it maybe takes 5 minutes, maybe less. So quick way of saying this would be less than 1% of the person's time swearing people in. It's more like 1/4% of their time. To suggest that we should call the position, give it a title based on what they do less than 1% of the time makes no sense to me. And Jim points to Lincoln. Well, you know, there are 352 cities and towns in the Commonwealth. You could find one that has any structure you like. I looked around at towns around here that are of somewhat comparable size to ours, like Westboro, Hopkinton, Ashland, Northborough. They're all actually larger than us. Not a single one of them has 3 people with a clerk, whether it be deputy clerk, assistant clerk. Not one of them has 3 people doing that job. I had a conversation again with Jim last night. You saw his note that if we didn't approve the assistant town clerk position, if we were to approve what I had proposed as a compromise, he would not allow that person to administer oaths. And I asked him why that was, and his response was, well, I said, is there something in the statute that would prevent that person from administering oaths? And he said, yes, it says town clerk or administrative town or assistant town clerk. Well, I looked in the statute, I couldn't find any such language. Anyway, be that as it may, my suggestion is that we essentially rescind our vote. You remember we previously adopted the assistant town clerk job description really so that it could go into the Collins study. But now with the information that I now have, and I think most of us have, I would be inclined to rescind that vote and just leave it as it is as an administrative assistant position. So with that, I would open it for further discussion.
I come at it, unfortunately, from a different angle. Part of being an employee in town government is being available to assist the public in as much of a capacity as you can. I get it's probably 1% of this person's time. If we were proposing to reclassify because of this 1%, I'd have a huge issue. I candidly am not hung up on the title and would actually be fine with assistant town clerk, with the understanding that this is not going to be reclassified And at least the current, like, if the board agreed, the current position of the personnel board is that that task alone would not create a reclassification. Obviously, Mr. Hegarty's elected a position that, role will turn over at some point, right? And other people may have different views in the future, but I think it's silly to get caught up on this candidly, and I think we have to look at it as if it's gonna allow them to run the office just that much more efficiently, as someone that's having challenges getting people sworn in and finding the right time on other committees. I don't think it's worth haggling over terminology, and would be willing to go to just calling it assistant town clerk, keeping it at a A3 and moving on.
Okay, but I think the same rationale that we seem to apply to the community development coordinator, people not thinking the job was needed. I don't see what evidence there is the job is needed. I just pointed to 4 towns that are larger than us by 50 or 60%, seem to be able to do it with 2 people. So why do we suddenly,
It comes at no point.
because the town clerk says, I want to have this extra title, why do we suddenly say, okay, that's enough for us?
Because it doesn't cost you a penny.
But I mean, just as a manager, and a background in employment, to call a job, to give a job title for a function, it does maybe 0.25% of the time. Why not then say administrative assistant / assistant town clerk? I could live with that.
We all obviously were fine with that originally.
Well, then we can, I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'll let others speak.
anyone?
I would just say in general, when you're changing a description, a title, there's some identifiable modification or broadening of scope. And I think the reason why there's maybe some debate here is that we haven't seen that identifiable broadening of scope in order to support a new title for that. So I think that's where the distinction may be. Are there other duties that were added or expanded?
It's just the swearing in.
Yeah, and Jim is clear in that. That's the only difference. And that's why the Collins Center says it's an administrative assistant position that we've added one small function to.
Mhm.
I agree
I-
with Michelle.
John,
Does the town clerk, he says here, oppose changing the position to administrative assistant, assistant town clerk. If that, I would suggest you use, what law or what basis is he saying that these 2 positions with the name administrative assistant and administrative? What does he base whether they can administer the oath of office?
again, all I can relate to you is our conversation last night, where I asked him the question why he put in the memo that he wouldn't allow that person to swear people in. And he said, because I said, is there some statute that says that? And he said, yes, the statute precisely says town clerk or assistant town clerk. And I did a quick look. I don't want to say that
Yes, town council.
we certainly can. I couldn't. Yeah, I couldn't find, I found the town clerk statute that said. And I should have thought to say to him, well, if it says that you have a deputy town clerk, how can that person swear? I mean, so anyway, I didn't want to get into a discussion, but we can certainly find that out. And I can go back to Jim and say, look, the board is willing to support the administrative assistant / assistant town clerk position. We'll get an opinion from council. That person can swear people in. We live with that.
He doesn't want the word, I mean, at least by reading his memo, he doesn't want the words administrative assistant. He wants one or the other, not both.
Well,
I didn't hear what Dorianne thought. She said something, but I didn't hear what she said.
I completely agree with Michelle. So I'm not really in favor of this change. I don't see the need for it. I just don't see the need to change that title, except to get money and, you know, a higher grade in an upcoming year or something. There's no reason to change that at all, that I can see, or that has been explained to me in any of this documentation in front of us. So that's my opinion.
Yeah, I would also just add that my other concern would be moving forward, setting a precedent around how we are modifying titles going forward. Given that in this instance, and based on what I have in front of me, does not represent a significant change in scope, I would be concerned about setting precedent here going forward, as we have other positions and other roles that may have to take on some small additional role or task. And then we're in a space where we now have made this decision for this role. Yeah. If I'm missing something though, happy to consider it again, but based on what I have, I'm not understanding the need at this time.
Yeah, and I do think we have to be concerned about sort of title creep. We went from town clerk, assistant town clerk, administrative assistant to now he's suggesting going to town clerk, deputy town clerk, assistant town clerk. It's just from what I've seen, that would be obviously it's Piers and Lincoln, but it's from what I could tell, very rare to have that kind of alignment. But in any event, so why don't we do this? We'll have counsel give us an opinion. We'll go back to Jim, see if he's willing to be open to that suggestion, assuming there's no legal impediment to it. And we'll address it again if he's willing to. If not, then I think at the next meeting, well, we'll deal with it at the next meeting. All right, moving on to D. And as we go through revisions, let me just say that it's not my intention that we vote on any or all of these things today. I just wanted to get them out there to everyone so you could look at them. We can talk about them today with an eye toward maybe adopting as many as possible at the February meeting. So with that, Jason,
Okay, Chief, are you here for D3 or are you here for the?
Oh, okay.
Can we,
Yes, okay.
John, are you staying for the whole thing regardless?
Pretty much.
Okay, because I was gonna, can we just take D3 out
Yeah,
of order?
that's fine.
Just, I know, mine could be 2 minutes or if we.
Yeah,
want longer, so,
you have my memo, which is on page 44
sorry, D2. is what we're looking to
of
take
the
out.
packet. Yes, D2 election workers and Schedule D. Just briefly, Jim discovered this statute which applied to election workers that pretty clearly says that the select board makes the decisions with regard to their compensation. I happened to come across the language in the fire chief statute, which to me said the same thing. So I got an opinion from council to confirm that. I have communicated with the chief as well as Mr. Haggerty about moving forward, and they're both on board with the select board making these decisions. And so the suggestion would be that we remove election workers and Schedule D from the SAP. That's pretty much it.
Just have a question for the chief. I'm good on the election worker. Chief, in the memo we got, it referenced this started with discussion around the deputy. Is that position moving forward? And if so, is your intent that you would set that to, or are you just asking us to deal with the on-call piece of that that's in the SAP right now?
Well, I don't know where the deputy position is going. We have a meeting tomorrow.
Okay.
So we'll have better understanding, and as my understanding, the deputy would fall under the state statute.
Yeah, great.
And I think we deal with that when it comes, but
Okay.
we do have the call members, we have the detail rate that is set in SAP that is for part-time firefighters that we I support that we take out to be clean and consistent with the state statute.
And, you know, just so it doesn't fall through the cracks. I mean, we had already approved the increase for Schedule D, but
Right.
you're gonna need to get that done by select board now.
So I fully support removing the on-call members that are in the SAP related to fire. I think we talked about this a couple of years ago when the chief came for his larger increase to get them back in order. Like, I think it clearly falls under the strong chief statute. If the deputy moves forward, though, I realize you have the ability to set salary, right, and recommendations with the consent of select board. I would encourage you, obviously, to use this board as a liaison or advisor. I don't want to get in the way of where that goes, but I think I'll speak for myself, but I'm sure others will be willing to help you think through job descriptions. You've obviously seen what we just dealt with other positions, so just wanted that not to fall through the cracks either. So I'm supportive of both.
Any other comments? Okay, we might as well vote. I would move to remove election workers and Schedule D from the SAP.
Second,
Any further discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Zinsky,
Aye.
Ms. Jones Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Thorburn. Aye. Mr. Malinowski.
aye.
And the chair votes aye, that is approved.
And
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I apologize. I had one other question because we're moving towards the meeting tomorrow on budgets. And looking, if I may, I'll ask the question, you can decide if you want to address it or answer it or ponder it. We had a position that was is proposed in the FY24 budget based on the recommendations of the Collins Center reclassification, the business administrator 2. And I just was seeking clarification after looking at the minutes. The job description was approved. Is that correct?
The job description was approved, but it's as a business administrator 1, not as a 2.
Okay, and that's not consistent, as I understand it, with the recommendation of the Collins.
It was not, well, it was not in the original report. They had recommended the business administrator 2. In subsequent conversations, and I don't remember whether that person was part of the second round of interviews, but Mary from the Collins Center revised her view and thought it was a business administrator 1.
Okay, because as we have these discussions and start writing out next year's budget, I think that's important for me to know where that stands. And I wasn't sure, based on the minutes, what the
Yeah.
position, so.
You missed the beginning of the meeting.
Yeah.
We edited our minutes because
Yeah.
the draft minutes were not accurate.
Oh, okay, so it was approved
As a 1,
as a business manager 1.
Yes.
Just not where it's positioned on the pay scale.
Brian would have where we fell out from. Brian and Kristen have all these detailed spreadsheets. So I don't know, Brian, how you're dealing with situations like this in terms of we have now kind of given, right? This is where we would recommend to pay, obviously subject to appropriation, but Brian, there should be some coordination there, I assume.
And the revised, the update from the Collins Center is available to say where that position was, or was that?
no, that was in a discussion with actually Jason and I and Mark, a follow-up after the interviews. It was not, I don't believe it's in the supplemental.
Well, and there was
report.
I mean, I think there was discussion in the personnel board meeting
Okay,
of the job description looked in more aligned with all the others we were reclassifying to 1. So I think there was unanimous support to move it out of the administrative assistant. But when we compared it to where the business administrator 2 and I guess the police, which is technically like a 3, there wasn't, you kind of compare that. So that's where we voted.
and again, just for clarification, so I would, as the department head that this position we're proposing, I would be able to get some information from the Collins Center that they provide that position, that they revise their recommendation that I have in their document is business administrator 2. Would I have the ability to find it where their new recommendation is a business administrator 1? Or was that just the position of the board?
Well, I think it was both. I don't think you're gonna find it in writing, just as there's not a write-up for every move that they recommended. There was a grid where they showed, from whatever it was, from here to here, but there was not necessarily a detailed write-up about. But what it is their analysis of the job description, based on comparison with other positions. And essentially the job duties, and that's where they came out at. I don't know that they can provide. We've never done that, gone back and said, why did you, give us a write-up of why did you recommend this here?
And Mr. Chairman, again, the initial report has it as a business administrator 2.
Right.
That was the position after the work that the Collins Center did. And that's what I was proposing moving forward. If it's been revised, I'm just trying to get clarification, is it a revision from business administrator 2 to 1 from the board? Or is it a recommendation from the Collins Center? 'Cause I'm moving forward this position based on the recommendations of the Collins Center. That's what my proposal is predicated on. So I'm just trying to get clarification if that was it the board changing it or the Collins Center? And I would like, if I could, I'd like to see that recommendation.
And I don't know that I can split it. I think we both came to the same conclusion, but I will say that the Collins Center, after going through an additional round of interviews after the first report, modified not just this one, other position, modified the recommendations. We then analyzed it independently, and as Jason said, we thought it should be here. That was also where the Collins Center ultimately came out.
And that be reflected in the minutes that the Collins Center did.
Well, so first of all, I think we shouldn't talk about this topic anymore. It's not on the agenda.
That's true.
Okay, I just,
But I think the revised minutes, once they get posted, are very clear. And it was more this board than the Collins Center.
okay,
We don't have a final report on that. We listened to the Collins Center. We don't have to act on anything the Collins Center did. And I would encourage you to work with Brian on
Okay.
how it should work in the budgets. And then if you need more information, I would ask, I think the chair could facilitate a conversation. You'll see our motion was very clear about potential in the future of 2. That's what the motion said.
and I apologize, it's just, we have the meeting tomorrow where on budgets.
Yeah, Brian should
Okay.
have all of that data. There's 1,000 spreadsheets. I can't speak to Brian how we can push that through everyone's budget.
And I apologize, thank you for the clarification.
Thank you, Chief.
Derek,
Oh, sorry, John.
that's my recollection of January 9th meeting was that we were to go ahead with this position as a business administrator 1A4.
Right.
That's what.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
That's what this was.
Yeah,
All right, thank you.
With the provision that we would listen to Mary on Karen. As to why we should.
All right, thank you, I appreciate it. Have a good day, everybody.
thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
Okay, going back to D1, and I know, Michelle, you have to leave at 10:30. So let's, I don't know that we'll get through all of it, but let's.
I'm gonna use my 11 minutes wisely then. We are working with Kate Federoff and team on what the bylaw revisions could look like. The one thing we took away from the October discussion was that this board, unless anyone has changed their mind, was a strong believer in what I'll call grandfathering, right? So giving any employee the ability to stay exactly where they are, and I'm specifically speaking to vacation at this point, right? If they like the current vacation policy that they were hired under, that was in the SAP, they can stay on it. If they like where we may be moving, they would have a one-time election to do it. We are working with Labor Council just to make sure that that satisfies all labor laws, vacation policy, et cetera. So I just want all employees to be aware that we think it's important to get that language right. Before we start sharing any sort of drafts of what it could look like. But the goal, unless we are told we cannot legally do it, is that employees are gonna have what they have now. They just may have the option to elect into something that if they believe it's better for them, they can do as such. And then, of course, new employees would be eligible, or would only have one choice. They would be on whatever new system we adopt.
Can I just ask a question?
Sure.
So why would an employee choose to stay in the current system?
Depending on where, it's gonna depend on where we land, how high we go and how quickly you get to certain years of, like, for example, if we decide at 10 years of service, you get 5 weeks of vacation. Anyone that doesn't have 5 weeks of vacation now is gonna run to the new program, is my guess.
Right.
However, if you're one of the employees that are in the 6-year one, they're gonna have to do a calculation of what's better for them. I think it could be a toss-up with those group. That's a very, very small group, especially those that are under the SAP and not under contract.
Well, but if you got 6 years under what's in front of us, they would get 4 weeks and now they get 3. Unless I'm misreading.
Well, no, we're gonna go, Vanessa's gonna pull up where we were at. So the goal is they're gonna have a choice.
No, but I'm trying to understand who would possibly choose to stay where they are.
My personal belief is those that already have 5 or 6 weeks of vacation they're already accruing that because of the carryover changes we're potentially proposing. But I think we have to agree on once we agree on the foundation, Barry, of what the personnel board is comfortable with going forward, then I think we can go back to the working group and say, all right, this is where we landed. All of them represent a different group. We'll be able to get their views, but until I know, like, I know where I stand, but I don't know where, we didn't take any votes back in October, so I need to understand where this new system may go, and then we can hear, employee with 11 years of service clearly moving on to the new plan. Employee with 25 years of service, they're like, no, I wouldn't do it, and here's why, just so that we all understand the implications of what we're adopting.
Okay.
So Vanessa, if you could bring up the slides, I want to go to the vacation accrual rate slide, which is slide 4 back in October. So if you remember the work that Dorian and I had done, one more slide down. We coming out of the working group, the general consensus of that group was starting employees with the 3 weeks right off the bat after a probationary type period made a lot of sense, given that most employees were already getting it anyways due to the provision we already had in the SCP. Not all, so we had I'll call it a difference of how that was being awarded. And then as a incentive for longevity and staying around, increase them quicker to a higher level of approval. I think the question I have for the personnel board today is, and I don't think it was unanimous back, at least when we did our straw poll in October, is does everyone agree with the 3-week concept? And if so, do you think 5 is the right number, or is that too high once you get to 10 years? Or do you have another view of how this chart should go? And I'm going to caution everyone before they give us their feedback that the understanding is we would also adopt a more stringent, if we went to some system like this, we can change the numbers so everyone sees fit. If we adopt this would be awarded on day 1 of the fiscal year. And we would also vote on a carryover provision. The working group was looking for 2. I also think there candidly has to be discussion of whether 1 is the right number. Again, people have the option to elect in. That's, I think, the decisions on the table. So I just wanted to see where people were at on this, because this starts to drive, obviously, where we go. So, Vanessa, maybe I don't know if
I'm
there's
so
a way-
sorry. I actually cannot see the slide.
Okay, so hang on.
So if it's in the packet, I can find it there.
It was from our October meeting, but Vanessa was sharing it on the screen in the room, I think. but not on the Zoom.
Can you see it now?
No, I can't. I don't know.
I can't see it either.
Okay,
Do the share in Zoom.
you have to share your screen maybe. Or I can,
No. Okay, here we go.
Yeah. Then we want to go back to the Zoom screen once it's shared though, so we can see what.
How about now?
perfect. Thank you so much.
You can see it.
Is Hassan Whitehair, is there a way to see our participants? Can we see the,
Can I do screen?
We do a screen, see the screen.
there we go. Okay, that's great. Can you all still see it?
Yes.
You're all good. Good. So I guess my question is, what problem is this trying to solve?
It's trying to solve, so there's a few things. It's trying to reward longevity. It's a tool for Mr. Purple when he goes out into the marketplace to source these positions in terms of pretty much at least my personal opinion is you want to have 3 weeks to kind of dangle out there as a guarantee, not subject to this, this, and this. And also, on the back end is trying to solve a financial problem, which is how this all started, of carrying this stuff on the books, right? We're trying to, from a personnel board perspective, encourage employees to take vacation in the year it's awarded, right? So we're saying, we want you to take your 3, 4, 5 weeks in the year, and we're going to significantly limit how much of that you carry to the next year, but we're gonna give it to you in the front so that if you like your vacations in the summer, go take your vacations in the summer if that works for your department. Go take it in the winter if that's what works for your department, or take it in late spring. You'll kind of have that flexibility, again, subject to department operations. Those are the 3 problems I think this is solving.
Okay, but the carryover piece is a separate piece. You could keep the current vacation schedule and still deal with the carryover piece. You don't need to change the vacation schedule to do that.
I would, the only reason well, yes, on the carryover, but if you change, I'm a firm believer that we need to start with 3 weeks across the board.
Based on what?
Based on,
I would say based on a competitive talent market, I think what this looks very consistent with what I've seen in other organizations. And
Well, I've done some, the BLS says in private industry, there are only 18% of workers who get more than 2 weeks in their first year. 18% in private industry. And then secondly,
I think there's a lot of different data out there. I think if my understanding was that the town expressed a concern or a challenge with attracting talent, and if this was one of the levers that we had to utilize to do so, it makes sense to have that as a consideration.
well, but I mean, there's just no evidence of that. Right? So the other point is we try to stay consistent with our peer communities, our comparable communities,
Mhm.
and none of the peer community. Where we are now aligns perfectly with where all the other communities are. We try to do it on wages. I don't know why we decide, sure. Then the other piece is there is a cost to this. You're taking 40 weeks of productivity out. That means people might have to wait an extra week for a building permit or an electrical inspection or who knows what. But there is an impact on services when you do this. And if I thought we were gaining something, I'm not aware of any situation where we've had a competitive problem because of how many weeks of vacation we offer. Not one. So to say
you're giving everyone 3 weeks anyways, for the most part.
when they're eligible, but we have a system to do that. But to say that we have to give someone who's right out of high school 3 weeks vacation just doesn't make any sense to me. That's not, as far as I can tell, that's not how private industry is. That's not how the other communities are. The other thing I'd say are there are other alternatives we might think about. For example, you may have seen Swampscott has gone to a 4-day work week. And I'm not suggesting we do that, but who knows? Down the road, that might, certainly a lot of private companies have an annual leave policy instead of a vacation policy. So there are a lot of ways to go, but just to jump and say, let's just give everybody an extra week of vacation, because we think it might, in some circumstance, there might be able to attract someone. I mean, from talking to people who work for the town, it seems to me there are a lot of reasons why people choose to work for municipality as opposed to private industry, federal government, whatever. But it's not because of they think they'll get more vacation. So I just don't see the point. I just think we're doing something and we're coming up with this complicated system. Well, to charge, some people will be on fiscal year, some people will be on the current. It's a lot of moving parts to accomplish, I don't think, anything. Go ahead, John.
Look, we asked Mr. Burkle if this is advantage competitive against the new hire. Would this be an advantage for him, his new hire?
It's a good thing I catch up quick. So I guess I would say it depends. You know, it is great to have a lot of tools in the toolbox, right? Because for some people, you know, they're, you know, the most important thing for them is money. Some people, it's quality of life. Some people, and more people, I will say more people, and Ms. Hale can correct me, more people seem very interested in time off. You know, time off is important, time away with, you know, family and everything else, and that is an important component. So I can't say that it's the mitigating factor that seals the deal on everything. But it is nice to have something in the toolbox when that is the thing that is important to the candidate that you're looking to get. So I don't know whether you want to.
Yeah, I mean, that's something we talk about with every single applicant, every finalist. You know, we talk about, you know, the half-day Fridays is really important to people, but, you know, especially people that have years of service in other communities or state agency, to be able to offer them what they have now, so they don't have to decrease and, you know, go back to 2 weeks. So the 3 weeks is.
So to the chair's point, I think that, you know, and you made I mean, we have something in place to address that, you know, that if, you know, can get you to 3 weeks instead of the 2. But to what you just said, we don't have something that says, well, you've got somebody who's coming in who's been doing this for 20 years. And you know, you can't get a comparable amount of vacation coming in the door from a similar position, and you know, and not to complicate this, because that's a whole different thread we're pulling on for this. But did I not answer your question?
Yes. I've got
I'm
some.
sorry, I will need to depart.
Okay,
My apologies.
it's okay. Thank you, Michelle.
Bye.
From my own personal experience, working in municipal service for 43 years, it's my opinion that we'll get into this later on in this same subject, is that people, each department should have a regulation. Part of that regulation is that they be required to take their granted vacation. Because I think it's very important for your own self to actually get away from the job. My own personal experience, I never took probably better than half of my vacation. Not because I didn't think that they could survive without me, but that, I had a good job. You know, the family situation, I really didn't want or afford to go to the Caribbean for 2 weeks or whatever. But I think the point is, it's very important that people get away from their job and that they be required to get. Now, I can understand if your daughter's getting married and she's gonna get married in California and you don't wanna go out there for 2 or 3 days for the wedding, you wanna make it a week, something like that, and I think you've got it in place that you can do that now. You could- But, this vacation is a very, very touchy subject with a lot of people. Unfortunately, as Mr. Purple said, a lot of people are more interested in give me more money. I'm not interested in vacation. But I think this vacation, I think it's very reasonable to adopt this chart the way it is.
Dorian, you want to jump in or?
Yes, I'm sorry if I missed, my screen froze for a second, so I hope I'm not repeating a question. Mark, are we already giving 3 weeks to the majority of the people that we bring in based off of their history, they've already been in the public sector and their background and what they're coming to us from another town? Are we, for the majority, we are doing 3 weeks?
Yeah, based on the criteria that we have, already in the SAP, I would say the majority of the people are getting 3 weeks.
Okay, so I'm not sure if Brian is in the audience. How many employees, if we were to make this change, how many employees would actually be impacted by giving them an additional week because they don't have the 3 weeks? How many employees do we have? 1, 2? Any? I mean, we may not even have any. Do we know that?
I would just say a handful. I would say.
Okay. But it's a small number was my point.
It's a fairly small number, yes.
So it's not a large financial burden to the town if we were to adopt this.
But everybody would get, it's not just the people who aren't getting 3 weeks yet. Virtually everybody would get an extra week.
Anyone that's not, that's a fair, every employee is gonna be impacted that has 10 or less years of service.
Yeah.
Is I think the best way to put it.
Oh, okay.
But the main rationale behind that is, Barry, I think your point is incredibly valid about like, you wanna be able to walk in and get your building permit if the building department assistant is not there. Like, these department heads are really good at like covering each other, right? Like, so you may have, like, I don't want to make up like an example, but like you may have someone else that's in that same building come and sit at that desk. Maybe they can help process it, or maybe,
But there has to be some impact. You're taking, 30 hours, 30 weeks of work away. There has to be an impact on that. Otherwise, you're way overstaffed.
I think you balance it with, are they actually sitting there and being productive the time they're there because they've actually been worn out? I think that's the fundamental. You're never going to be able to measure it. Yeah, we overstaff some places. I don't want to go down that road. I'm sure we are, but that's not our job. I think our job is to provide a benefits recommendation that is competitive in the marketplace. I understand. We've now been 2 years since we looked at SAPs. I wonder if any other towns have changed it. Most of it's policy too.
I did ask Vanessa to check that and she couldn't find any that have changed.
So I had this conversation with Mark on a different topic. I hope you'll be okay with what I'm sharing. Is he was talking with the managers at MMA and they were getting no one to apply for any position. So this to me, would this get additional applications? I have no idea, but I think we need to do something. And this was the best I could bring forward, based on my review and understanding what other municipalities are doing. And also looking at what we've already awarded our unions in town, right? Which these folks don't have a collective bargaining unit, right? So kudos to those collective bargaining units that have negotiated something. But I think that's the balance here. If you wanted to stay on the current system, then I think you're still gonna have most people coming in at 3. You're still gonna end up with most people on this system more often than not.
But I just struggle with, so, you know, we, as a rationale for cutting vacation accrual, we look at and say, well, the other towns don't do that. Or for sick leave or vacation carryover, the other towns don't do that. But this is on compensation, we want to be aligned with the other towns. But this area, we need to be better than everyone else. And either that's how we operate. We're trying to be competitive with the communities where we've identified as comparable communities, or we're competing with them. If we're competing with, well, obviously we're competing with them in one sense, but if our goal is to be the best, well, let's raise salaries. Let's leave sick leave accrual the way it is. Why are we saying in this area we have to be ahead of everyone else?
Because you're already doing it. You're already doing it.
We don't know that we're already doing it. How do we know the other communities don't have the same system for hiring people?
I'm just looking at Southborough. I'm not even just comparing to the,
We're getting for new hires, but you're giving everyone an additional week.
not everyone.
Not,
Well, but you're not-
necessarily, only if they fall on the end.
Well, people who are,
Only,
You can if your concern is that, you can widen the ranges a little bit, but. Most people we're hiring are already coming in with 3 weeks. Which means
because they're experienced people. They're not people
we
we're
don't have any
hiring.
experienced people in town government, is what I've found. At least recent
Right, but you
hiring.
did, but remember, you did broaden the SAP because it was just municipal
Right, we did
experience.
that
So
a few
you did
years
broaden it, so
we did.
comparable experience from either private or
Yep.
public sector. And that has been beneficial, but, and I think that is why that most everyone coming in now is getting 3 weeks because they've at least got that level of experience.
so you hire an experienced people.
Yeah.
Right, so we're already dealing with that.
And just one other thing, I think that, you know, the things that we did with the paying class and looking at, you know, what other communities are paying. You know, our goal is not to be paying more than anybody else. Our goal is to be in the conversation. And then it's a matter of, do we have anything else that can give us that edge, you know? And sometimes it's quality of life. And quality of life is, you know, is like I said, it's becoming more important. And that doesn't just mean time off, that means, you know, proximity to the community. You know, how far is my drive? You know, what is your ability for me to, you know, work remotely? That's another issue that I think that, you know, and
It's not going away.
the chair, you know, the chair brought up, you know, the 4-day work weeks. They have been tried. I don't want to be on the front side of that wave, but I would like to see how that goes. And then be happy to, you know, potentially think about dipping our toe in, you know, on something like that. So anyway, all right, I'm not helping. I'm just.
So John, just to your point, so if you've got 5 to 10 years with the town, you currently get 3 weeks, you would automatically now get 4 weeks. If you've got 10 to 15, you now get 4 weeks, you would automatically get 5 weeks. So virtually everyone is going to get an extra week of vacation.
I'll say this about that. I think, number one, it's important that the town and Mr. Purple have every tool in his box that he can use to be competitive. Okay, because it's a competitive market out there.
People are still going to get the 3 weeks, whether it's there or the system we have now.
But it's important that he have every tool that he can use to be competitive. And it's also, it would help our existing employees who might have to make a decision of whether they want to go somewhere else where they might have a benefit, an extra benefit. It's, you gotta consider helping on non-contractual employees also there.
Well, I think we always try to do that.
I
We,
think this is just another step in doing.
I think we need to think about replacement cost, and which I don't know any.
but tell me there's a problem. Don't tell me about replacement costs unless we're losing large numbers of people or we can't,
The
we're
population-
not hiring people because of vacation.
Again, it's one aspect of a broader conversation.
But why is it one aspect but we're not gonna do more on wages, we're not gonna do more on,
I would argue we just did a significant amount in wages.
okay, to keep competitive with the other communities, not to get ahead of the other communities.
Jason, Barry, let me ask you a question. Do we have a financial impact on what this will hit the taxpayers with if we do this, if we go with this chart to do the extra week?
Brian, can you correct me if I'm wrong on this? This is how I've always thought about it in my head. It costs us productivity, right? Potentially, right? You know, we're never gonna be able to fully measure this. I hope we can agree on that, right? Like, yeah, they're not working an additional 40 hours potentially, right? But hopefully they're giving us more during the other hours they're here. That's the trade-off. I don't know how that boils down. I think the benefit from a pure financial, if you just totally didn't care what the employees thought or how they viewed it, is your balance sheet at the end of the year. So if this was a fiscal year policy, all that would happen at the end of the year is Brian and Kristen would go in and look at everyone's vacation balance on 6/30. And everyone would go down to 1 or 2 weeks. And we multiply that by their current salary rate. That's what we're subject to pay out if they left the next day. Like, so our liability, instead of carrying 4, 5, 6, 12 weeks for employees, we're now down to carrying no more than 1 or 2, depending on what we were to vote.
But again, that's the carryover part you're talking about.
But you gotta give something to get something too, is part of this. Here's what I would suggest. We lost Michelle. How about if I work with Brian? I know you've got a lot going on this weekend. How about I work with Brian between now and the next meeting and show what this would actually do, assuming all employees opted in, how many people this impacts? Because I think what you're gonna find is most of the people we've hired in the last couple of years, as they progress through the system, it's gonna be no change for them on this chart because they already started with 3. Then because of the provisions already in the SAP, they moved to 4 after 5 years. And then they would move to 5 at 10 years instead of 15 years. So there's gonna be a population of employees, but we only have a certain number of full-time employees anyways that have this benefit, right? And then once we start peeling the onion back, you probably gonna have to put the 6-week vacationers off to the side. And then it's the population I don't think is gonna be as large as we're talking about, but let's look at facts. Because I think we need to be unanimous on this. I don't think having dissent on this is going to help move the needle forward. And I also think Labor Council weighing in on, there are obviously very strict labor laws. We want to do this right. And I hear you that it's complex if we have 2 systems in place. But I think the chart will show us probably who's going to elect into what. Obviously, we can't make decisions for people, but it'll show us you've got this many people that would have a benefit of extra weeks. This many people that basically a status quo, and Mark and Vanessa can start to think about this 3-week aspect and liaise with other managers. I get it's not formally in anyone's plans, but are they talking about adopting it, et cetera? And I'm also just trying to level out the playing field on how our current SAP works. Right now, it's how good of a negotiator is the employee and how good is the department head in terms of advocating for that employee to the personnel board at the time of hiring or the appointing authority. In most cases, it's the select board, right? But in some cases, it's not. Because I just want to be fair across the board of, how are we defining experience? Because it's very broad now, which is good, right? Gives us a lot of, but we don't act unless someone brings it to us. So that's what I would suggest we do between now and the next meeting.
Jason, Can I ask a question? Jason, while you're working with Brian, the piece that I would actually like to see is the actual financial cost of those that we're changing and they're gonna add the week. What is the financial burden that's going to be incurred from this change?
Yeah,
It's zero.
That's what we need. Yeah, I mean, we just definitely need to know what that's gonna do.
But it's
Dorian,
it's zero.
It's zero.
It's zero. There's no additional cost to the taxpayer in that sense because they're paying the same amount per year for that employee. It's just the employees working for most of them 1 week less.
Oh, that's
So you-
right. They're on salary and you add a week of vacation, you just pull them out of the work. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, there's clearly things you can't measure. I mean, there's lost, as I said, there's lost
Yeah.
productivity. I just, and I agree, and we'll do all that and we'll come back and discuss it on this whole 3-year thing. It's, and I don't know how many have happened in the recent few years, but it's pretty automatic that Mark, if he has a candidate who has the relevant experience, comes in here and says, this person has experience, I want to give him 3 weeks. It's done. It's not any negotiation. It's not, either the person has experience, which they all have since I've been on the board, and we just automatically grant it. It's not a process where someone has to sort of work the system if they're eligible.
Yeah, and I'm not saying the person, I think it came to our attention during the working group. And when we actually looked at the data, it showed there are some people with 2 weeks of vacation that likely could have made an argument in the current wording otherwise. I'm gonna just leave it at that. And I think we move on to this
Okay.
topic. I think we have our to-dos.
Okay. All right, does that just leave us with, you don't want to do anything else on benefits?
We gotta agree on that, because
Okay.
it ripples effect, right, as you can tell. So, yeah,
Okay.
unfortunately.
All right, let's move on to D3, our on-call. This is your 3rd time here on this, John?
Yeah.
Fourth.
Barry, I just want to warn you, I have a few minutes before I'm gonna have to
Okay,
depart.
so this should be, I mean, it's pretty straightforward at this
I agree.
point. So we are at page 47 in the packets. Thank you for the memo, which I think lays it out. And in the interest of time, I'll ask if anyone has any questions.
Nope.
I have a comment that's gonna lead to a motion.
Okay,
This is almost a 3 times increase of what, if you look, sorry, if you look at what we were compensating up until the vote at the last personnel board meeting, you were just over $100, right?
150.
150, okay, so 2 times increase, sorry. We then obviously went up to what was already allowed in the bylaw, subject, right? So, yep, to the 200, and now this is going to 300. I agree with all the verbiage that's in here. As we've talked about throughout the whole meeting, we have boundaries of what our parameters are, so I'm supportive of the language in the number as a placeholder, but I think obviously it should be subject to the support of the select board and advisory that, you know, when you go make your budgetary presentation, because I think obviously if they don't support it, but they support a number between 200 and 300, it should come back to the personnel board and we should modify our vote, and we should basically make a referral as part of our motion that they weigh in on the budgetary impact, which I know you're probably gonna have to deal with tomorrow.
Adopted the budget.
So, because we need to be cognizant, right? In my view, we're very generous with what we've done with overnight, what I'll call increases across the board, well deserved for everyone. I just don't want to have someone say, oh, you've now doubled the impact of this. You clearly have very good comparables and very good data that you've taken, I'll call a middle of the road approach. So with that, Barry, I will move that, subject to the budgetary approvals of the select board and advisory to advance this to town meeting, that we adopt the language as recommended by Mr. Parent.
Second.
okay, and that. I was just gonna say, and that, just to be clear, is the bold-faced language in Mr. Parent's memo dated January 24th.
Yep.
You were gonna say, were you gonna say second?
She
I
seconded.
second.
Okay, roll call vote, Mr. Zinsky,
I,
Mr. Thorburn,
Aye.
Mr. Malinowski,
Aye.
chair votes aye. It is finally approved.
Just the fastest item today, all right. Thank you, everyone.
Congratulations. Is there any other business to come before the board? Seeing none, any public comment? No one out there wants,
Oh, hang on. Ryan Donovan.
Mr. Donovan.
Go ahead,
Hi,
Ryan.
everybody.
All right,
I would like to suggest to have an employee representative from the working group be present next time you discuss section 11.
and that's fine, and that's why I wanted to make clear at the beginning, we were not voting on any of these things, so this is out there, I mean, the agendas are posted.
Mr. Parents, member of the work.
Yes, so I mean, we're certainly welcome to attend. And I'm sure Jason would welcome any input they have.
I mean, yeah, the working group input's obviously what led to the proposal. We just obviously need some more data.
Yeah, but I think what he's proposing is just the formalization of what the working group came up with, I think.
Yeah, it's not, I mean, this isn't to be critical. I think this is, I know that there's some data sometimes that comes up where feedback from a department head specifically might be helpful. I think John and I try to attend meetings anyway. I would just want to, I think it would be helpful if there were questions, if you could ask someone as a representative of the working group who's on the employee side. It's a suggestion. You're welcome to take it or leave it at that.
I think maybe we just communicate with the working group that we're going to be dealing with this again at the meeting on February 10th, and they're welcome to attend. I mean, I don't think it's anyone's intent to freeze, and I don't mean you're suggesting this, Ryan.
Yeah, I think we got it.
Yeah, I think we want to continue to have their participation as much as possible, so it's a fair point. Okay.
I mean,
Thank you,
I had a
Ryan.
couple,
Okay.
I had
Okay.
a few minor feedback pieces about your discussion on section 11, but I don't know if you'd rather I send that to you. I mean, I'm happy to convey it now, if you would entertain that.
Why doesn't Ryan, why don't you either call me or send an email, and then we'll make sure it gets to the broader personnel board for the next discussion.
It's only in the interest of time. Jason's got to go and Michelle's gone, so
Okay.
I'd rather if we're going to do it, we do it in a larger group. So you can communicate with us and we will take it into consideration.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks, Ryan. Okay, we only have 3 members here. I'm not going to do calendar. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
second,
All in favor, Mr. Zinsky,
I.
Mr. Thorpe.